Hello, this is reading 3, David Carrasco's Religions of Mesoamerica. This is the asynchronous presentation for Group 1, Section 1. So to start off, in 1943, Paul Kirchhoff was a German anthropologist that lived in Mexico. Here he developed a perspective on the cultural aspects of Mesoamerica. He discovered many aspects, like the writing, intensive agriculture, step pyramids, large ranges of languages, solar calendars, long-distance trade, and more. His groundbreaking article designated Mesoamerica within a limited area, so this would be the southern two-thirds of mainland Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and parts of Honduras, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua. Pedro Amias and others, after this article was published, revealed the diverse world of the pre-Hispanic Mesoamerica. So there was the maize and its regenerative cycle that was celebrated in many religious practices, and the social frontiers, dynamic cultural exchange, and robust communication networks highlighted the diverse world of the pre-Hispanic Mesoamerica. In 1519, Hernan Cortez led the Spanish army across the Mayan coastal territories and into the Valley of Mexico. They forced the Aztecs into submission. However, the Spanish were very close to losing against the Aztecs twice. An example of this was La Noche Triste. And then the Mesoamerican people fell under the complete control of the Spanish army by 1521. However, among the different groups, like the conquerors, indigenous survivors, mestizos, there's physical, cultural, and religious conflicts. The general perspective in Mesoamerica was that the Spaniards obliterated and altered Mesoamerica, and the indigenous were victims spiritually, physically, and culturally. Surviving ethnic groups were changed dramatically. It was impossible to identify a common colonial history for all of Mesoamerica, but there was both appropriation of new Spanish culture and institutions, while at the same time there was reviving pre-Hispanic religious ideas and practices. There was a quote in the textbook. It kind of summarizes this idea. Two or more different kinds of life absorbed each other and produced things new and different from anything else in the world.
Our text defines Mesoamerica in two ways. The more common definition used is that it's a pre-Hispanic world with a blend of cultures. It was known for flourishing in civic centers, city-states, and social networks, but what's unique is that their empire was created without foreign influence. In the second definition, some historians believe that Mesoamerica is a cultural combination of European and indigenous ideas and practices. When the Spanish invaded, they introduced 4 institutions into Mesoamerica: the Spanish language, the Roman Catholic Church, a royal bureaucracy, and a new technology were forced onto their population. The main reason the invaders succeeded is because they brought with them a disease that wiped out 24 million people from the indigenous population.
The native people of Mesoamerica in the Spanish colonialist worldview, although they certainly didn't have equal rights, weren't entirely the savage other. Spaniards tried to convert them to Catholicism, they tried to adopt them into their culture, and they even sometimes started families with them. There were 3 important developments in Spanish-Indian relationships in the 17th century. The first was the development of miracle shrines and the cults of the Virgin Marys, like the Virgin of Guadalupe, for example. Spaniards, Indians, and mestizos all devoted significant religious belief and practice to them. The second development was the peasantization of native Mexicans, as Carrasco calls it, many of whom became seasonal laborers in farms and elsewhere. This social dynamic led to an exchange of culture between the indigenous Mexican and Mesoamerican cultures and then the colonial Spanish culture. The third development is that in some parts of Mesoamerica, pre-Hispanic forms of community and identity saw a resurgence. The new ordering of space in Mesoamerica combined Spanish and indigenous traditions. For example, the continuation of tianguis, a certain type of market that was common in pre-Hispanic Mesoamerica, saw a regrowth in rural areas away from Spanish hegemony. There was also a series of revolts that weakened the Spanish grip of power over Mesoamerica. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church's power over indigenous communities weakened in the following centuries, but they continued to promote the Virgin of Guadalupe, mainly because the native people felt a strong connection to her.
Hi everybody, my name is Kozar and I'm going to be talking about section 4, which basically highlights the history of So this section starts out talking about how slowly the natives were moving farther away from the city, and then the explorers were moving into the cities because the natives wanted to get away from this oppression, but then that only made the oppression become more normalized because there was such little natives living in big cities. Um, and the explorers stepped on all of the history without highlighting how big of a part religion takes in our history. Now we know this thanks to people that hold this history and share it with others. But a big part that this section highlights is the fact that everything every like museum you go to, when you see any kind of history, you see that religion is a part of it, which was not being highlighted at all at the time. And this is why immigrants and people that keep this history alive and come and educate other people are so important. The last part of this section also highlights how our generation is going through a second great encuentro, and that is basically this new Hispanic world is being taken over by the African American culture.
Hi guys, so this section is about Mesoamerica and religions. Between 1492 and 1521, a significant transformation occurred in Mesoamerica due to Christopher Columbus's voyage and the conquest of Tenochtitlan, which is the Aztec capital. This period led to the discovery, invasion, and invention of the Nueva España and the New World. Mesoamerica was organized around ceremonial centers and cities, which shaped their religious, social, and economic life. Despite the devastating impact of Spanish conquest and epidemics, important aspects of Mesoamerican religious beliefs and practices have been preserved through archaeological, ethnohistorical, and literary evidence. Specifically, their views on space, time, and the cosmos were preserved.
In America, human culture managed the great transformation from pre-urban society to urban society. And this transformation can be seen through things such as artwork, symbolism, politics, and social organization. Ancient people were known to have visited several of the following cities. For example, Toulon, which is also known as the place of the reeds. According to Mesoamerican history, the cities listed above are important because they represent the story of people and their symbols moving to and from cities and their ceremonial centers. Even after the Spaniards came and imposed new civic and religious patterns onto the indigenous people, the ceremonial centers showed people where the sacred focal point of the world stood, which allowed for great communication with gods and their ancestors. Another important term to define is cosmovision. The definition of this word is a worldview that is charged with religious forces, stories, and ancestors who created the world and assist in its maintenance and renewal. In the ceremonial centers of Mesoamerica, this means a worldview with a strong sense of parallelism to supernatural forces of the cosmos and also the biological patterns of life on Earth.
So in this part of the reading, the author, David Gospel, went into depth about how the European encounters with Mesoamerica led to many misconceptions about the region. In the early 16th century, the European encounters with the New World, or in this case, Mesoamerica, generated both excitement and shock. In 1493, Columbus wrote a letter to the crown about his experience in discovering the New World, which was widely published across Europe, causing many Europeans to be astonished by the unfamiliar cultures, languages, people, and wealth that Columbus had found, leading to many misconceptions about Mesoamerica. And based on the accounts that Columbus wrote in his letter to the crown, Europeans constructed many different misconceptions and fantasies about the New World. And these misconceptions can be divided into two main categories, which are those related to the region's geography and those related to human nature and society. Essentially, Europeans envisioned the New World as an earthly tropical paradise with similarities to legendary places like the Garden of Eden, the Seven Enchanted Cities of Gold, the Fountain of Youth. Essentially, Shakespeare's The Tempest and Thomas More's Utopia reflected the belief that the New World would bring renewal and transformation and prosperity to Europe and other continents. However, once Europeans encountered entirely different new lands, peoples, languages, even wildlife, cultures, religions, and traditions, um, most, if not all, their existing beliefs about the New World were challenged, leading them to view the New World as less advanced, uncivilized, and disorderly.
When Europeans arrived in certain areas of Mexico and South America, they believed, based on flora and fauna and environment, that this was the biblical earthly paradise and that the humans living there, being the natives, have not changed since Adam and Eve. This later formed the idea of a millennial kingdom ruled by priests who would convert the natives to Christianity, which was done by dramatizing the religion of Catholicism and the image of holiness that demanded submission to a foreign transcendence. And Franciscan missionaries reenacted parts of the New Testament, such as the presence of 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. And also, natives were organized into utopian communities to prepare the way for the end time or the second coming of Jesus. And finally, the missionaries viewed the natives as soft wax, waiting to be impressed or molded by Christianity and the Holy Spirit, and were seen as souls to be saved. This is an illustration of the ideal church courtyard created by the first mixed race friar of the Franciscan order, Diego de Valadez, and published in Retórica Cristiana, which depicts the several components of the church courtyard, including the missionaries teaching basic Christian principles such as catechism, Holy Communion, baptism, prayer, and creation of the world. On a separate note, Mesoamerican landscapes was considered an abundant resource of gold, and stories of El Dorado, the city of silver and gold, and rumors of Moctezuma's buried treasure sparked individuals to seek out this treasure. And in the text, the author describes the Spaniards' response to the discovery of gold in some areas as their bodies were swelled with greed and their hunger was ravenous, showing their strong desire and lust and greed for wealth.
Hi, this is section 9 about the Spanish arrival in Mesoamerica. So some Franciscan beliefs about Mexico and the native people included they believed that Mexico's islands and South America's mainland were the earthly paradise as written in the Bible. The land was destined to be the millennial kingdom where priests would convert native people to Christianity. They believed that natives were souls to be saved. The millennial kingdom would fulfill New Testament prophecies heralding the return of Jesus Christ. And lastly, the Aztec capital was the place where the millennial kingdom would be created. So the Spanish arrival happened in 1524, where Martin de Valencia and 11 other priests arrived to the Aztec capital. The 12 priests reenacted the arrival of the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ on earth. And the arrival began the creation of the heavenly kingdom on earth. So the Spanish influence, some Christian teachings included in 1579, Diego de Valdez published the Rhetorica Christiana, a text in Latin created to aid preachers in evangelizing the natives. Priests taught natives about the Bible, Jesus Christ, Christian rituals and practices, and how to prepare for the second coming of Christ. The Mesoamerican landscape was abundant in gold, which caused stories like El Dorado and rumors of Moctezuma's buried treasure to make people become violent in pursuit of becoming rich and powerful. The gold riches were never found, though, as the Aztecs valued green stone, eagles, jaguars, and sea creatures more than gold.
two controversies, cities and human sacrifice. So there were two controversies that attracted debate and conversations about the Maya and Aztec people, and as well as Mesoamerican people that came before them and any kind of human civilizations that came before them. The two debates were whether or not they were socially and symbolically complex in comparison to urban civilizations, and the reasons behind their sacrifice and cannibalism rituals occurrence. An article entitled Moctezuma's Dinner by anthropologist Louis H. Morgan from 1876 painted Aztecs as solely barbaric, having these rituals that consisted of sacrifice and cannibalism being nothing more than animalistic tendencies. He condensed the evolution of humanity to savage, barbaric, to civilized, and claimed that Aztecs engaged in these rituals because their evolution halted at barbaric and therefore they did not know anything beyond what their practices were. However, scholars later discovered that similarities between Mesoamerican cities and the urban civilizations of China, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, India, and Peru existed. Therefore, those claims were refuted by actual evidence that was garnered later on. In regards to the sacrifice and cannibalism occurrence debate, anthropologist Marvin Harris described the Aztec people and civilization as a cannibal kingdom. There were debates regarding rituals that consisted of bloodletting, sacrifice, and cannibalism. The first main standpoint was that they did it solely for protein and profit. And the second standpoint was that it was a culturally rooted exchange of gifts through like blood, hearts, brain, thigh. They were giving each other a part of each other through for cultural reasons. And it turns out that both of these standpoints were rooted in kind of just like guessing and assumptions. There was no real evidence to support these claims or really make a clear standpoint. Later on, scholars discovered that Mesoamerican rituals transformed humans into deities. These rituals were way more complex than meets the eye or what previous anthropologists believed to be.
So, some of the problems facing the study of Mesoamerican religions include scattered and scarce pictorial, archaeological, and literary evidence. Also, one thing important to note is that Hernan Cortez's march on Tenochtitlan involved defacing, whitewashing, and removing of religious monuments and images. Also, Spaniards destroyed many images of deities and ceremonial life. So there's very little evidence we have. So I'm first going to talk about some of the problems facing the study of Mesoamerican religions. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the problems facing the study of Mesoamerican religions. First off, they have scattered and scarce pictorial, archaeological, and literary evidence. I'd also like to note that Hernan Cortez's march on Tenochtitlan involved defacing, whitewashing, and removing of religious monuments and images. Lastly, Spaniards destroyed many images of deities and ceremonial life. So, despite the challenges faced by the native people, they continued to keep their traditions alive by doing excellent reproductions of existing pictorials and continuing to translate Mayan scripts and Nahuatl documents. They also practice rituals in ceremonial centers that have dimensions of pre-Hispanic symbolism and meaning. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the ensemble approach. The ensemble approach is the integration of a variety of evidence, including pictorial manuscripts, ritual objects, myths, archaeological material, ethno-historical descriptions, and extensive mythologies. So basically, this approach combines four kinds of evidence: archaeological records, literary testimonies, pictorial manuscripts, and contemporary field work reports. So a little update on archaeological records. Recently, discoveries have uncovered major ritual artifacts and large portions of ceremonial centers from numerous Mesoamerican culture in the last 300 years. So we owe a lot of what we know to these archaeological records, and that's why it's important to keep making new discoveries so we can keep learning about the past and just continue to add to the study of Mesoamerican religions.
So for our conclusions, the key takeaways to this reading were that the cultural differences between the high cultures of central Mexico are what designated Mesoamerica as a distinctive area. In this text, the two definitions of Mesoamerica are 1. A pre-Hispanic world with blends of cultures, and 2. A complex and social and cultural combination of European and indigenous ideas and practices. So in this text, Carrasco introduces the concept of the shock of the new and different and emphasizes the cultural clash that took place during the Spanish invasion with Mesoamerican religions. And here he writes about what the Spanish invasion introduced as well as how they interacted with the natives. One important quote was, "Two or more different kinds of life absorb each other and produce things new and different from anything else in this world." And one example of this was with the introduction of the Catholic Church, they supported the growing Indian devotion to the Virgin of Guadalupe, who was perceived by the native people as one of their own. And lastly, Carrasco stresses the need to study the religions in their own history and culture, not using Western ideas. In this he quotes, "Rather than approaching religion from the privileged position, using things such as a pictorial manuscript, archaeological records, literary testimonies, and contemporary fieldwork reports."
Now please join us in scanning the QR code pictured above to go ahead and start our in-class activity.